Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I wanted to give you all a very warm welcome from wherever you're joining us and whatever time zone you're in. This is a special webinar hosted by Sleep Consortium, partnering with the Kith Collective. So it's my absolute delight to introduce you to Kim from the Kith Collective. We have been working with the Kith Collective over the last year, I think, at least, on this really special and important initiative called the Externally Led PFDD. That stands for Patient Focused Drug Development, which is a special meeting on April 11th with the FDA, where we really seek to elevate the patient voice and experience of all those living with idiopathic hypersomnia. So with that, we have some time now to present to you what that means, what it looks like, how you can get involved, and the significance of this meeting, and also hopefully to answer some of your questions. For your information, this will be recorded, so you'll be able to access it again on the internet, and we can give more details about that shortly. So with that, I want to hand over to Kim McCleary from the Kith Collective, our colleague, who is going to start us off with some really important information for everybody.
Thank you so much, Claire. It's so great to be part of this amazing initiative with the Sleep Consortium and the idiopathic hypersomnia community. I'm sort of one of the original gangsters of the patient-focused drug development sort of movement, and it's been really impressive to see the idiopathic hypersomnia community really ramp up its interest in taking part in this initiative and sort of rising to the occasion with this opportunity to speak directly to reviewers at the Food and Drug Administration and companies developing new therapies for idiopathic hypersomnia and the broader community. We've heard so many people who've never talked to another person with IH. And so this is really also an opportunity for the community to come together and learn from one another. So as we walk through this time we have together today, here are some things that I want to cover, but as Claire said, also want to hear from all of you about what your questions, interests and concerns are as we prepare for this meeting now just a little less than a month away. I want to give some more background beyond what Claire has shared about what patient-focused drug development is and the purpose of this meeting and some of the things that have come out of now about a decade's worth of engagement with the FDA on the topic of patient-focused drug development. And then we'll shift specifically to the Illuminate Hypersomnia meeting on idiopathic hypersomnia. And as some of you may know, we've had a survey in the field for a little more than 2 months, and we've got kind of a sneak preview of a little bit of data to share with you. And most of all, want to leave you with the sense of how you can be a participant in the meeting and help engage with others to make sure that we have really the full spectrum of experience within the IH community represented as we come together on April 11th. So first, as Claire mentioned, when we talk about this as an externally led PFDD meeting, we are really referring to patient-focused drug development. You might think, well, shouldn't all drug development be focused on the patient? And in fact, yes, it should, but for many decades, that has not always been the case. And we'll talk a little bit about sort of this shift and how it's come about. And there's sort of a whole new movement around really understanding what patients want, need, and expect, where their priorities are, what opportunities there are for companies to really align more closely with the unmet needs for a specific condition like PFDD as they, move through the different stages of developing a drug. And that's what we'll cover next, is thinking about this whole process of developing a medicine. And I don't intend for this to make anyone an expert on this. It's a long process with a lot of different steps. So we will sort of take a little short journey just to better inform you about sort of why this process has not served patients as well as it could in the past, and sort of what the new coming expectations are for patient involvement in the process of developing new therapies. So when a company, when scientists and researchers are trying to develop and understand better new medications in the process of scientific discovery, they are collecting data over a long period of time. And you can see in this figure here, sort of starting on the left and moving to the right, all the way from basic research, which is the kind of research that generally gets conducted at universities and private research institutions that look at cells and or maybe animal models. And then you sort of get into more of the drug discovery, which is the blue columns in the center of the figure. And then that orange column to the right is thinking about kind of all of the evidence that's been developed so far. And the purple really reflects once something is available as an approved medication in the doctor's office, ready for prescribing to patients who might benefit from that medicine. And if we think about this whole span of time, which can take 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, depending on the complexity of the condition and a range of different variables, you can see the white wispy lines going from left to right and sort of this narrowing cone, if you will, of maybe there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of potential compounds and chemicals that might be, sort of potentially useful. And that number gets smaller and smaller as you move from left to right. So in your academic research, there might be, many, many, many possibilities, and you're trying to collect evidence all in the service of understanding what will be safe to use in humans and what will be effective in terms of its impact on the disease and improving whatever symptoms or lab markers are most problematic for the patient population being studied. And in this case, we're thinking of it, of course, in the setting of idiopathic hypersomnia. It's important to note that it's up to the company developing the medicine to determine which patient population it's going to study their drug in. And this isn't a decision that's made by the Food and Drug Administration or anyone, directing a company that they have to study a particular disease. It's really driven by kind of opportunity and market factors and scientific opportunity. And this is important in a condition like IH, where there are, often some blurry lines between IH and things like narcolepsy type 2 and maybe other diagnoses and comorbidities that come along. And so we just want to make sure that it's well understood that it's a company decision about whether to study a medicine in IH or something else. And we want to sort of help them along in that decision once they have decided that they're going to target this disease and enlist the help of the community that experiences it to improve their programs. And that's what this meeting is all about. The other thing to note as we look at this figure is once we get all the way out to the right and we're in the purple area where there is an approved medicine that has been determined to be safe and effective, and it's in clinical use, it's available for doctors to prescribe to patients. Doctors have the flexibility to prescribe really any medicine that in their medical judgment might be potentially beneficial to treat symptoms or a particular disease. And we see that often, as we've been talking with members of the IH community, that often they're using a combination of treatments that may not be approved for IH, but are approved to treat things like excessive daytime sleepiness. And so that is sort of a medical judgment issue. So we've got both ends of the spectrum where a company's deciding which condition it wants to study, and doctors are then available able to use any treatment that's been approved to treat their actual patients. And putting this sort of really in the setting of IH, just for the community's awareness, there is one medication today that's been approved for the treatment of people with IH, and that treatment is called Xywav. It is calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium oxybates is the long name for it. And that, of course, is used by some patients with IH, and others are treated with stimulants and other medications, antidepressants, and a whole range of other things that are approved for other conditions, but as I said, maybe have benefit to improve some of the symptoms of IH. I know that's kind of wonky and in the weeds a little bit, and I don't intend it for anybody to have to memorize any of that information, but just did want to provide it as background so you can kind of see where we're trying to aim in terms of a better understanding of the community, of the need for this meeting, and what the FDA is hoping to get out of it. And the key thing is that as companies decide to focus on idiopathic hypersomnia and go through this lengthy, quite expensive process of developing a new medicine that might be a potential treatment for IH, they're, again, always looking for evidence that it will meet the standard that the FDA and other regulators around the world are looking for to show that it's safe and effective for the patient population it's intended to treat. And those two words are sort of, the gold standards as we think about the development of new medicines. But of course, those are subjective words. What you might consider safe in terms of a treatment and side effects and potential adverse events might be different than what I think is safe. And what level of effectiveness you might be looking for might be different from what I might be looking for as we each take a treatment. So the subjectivity of those two words is really at the heart of what patient-focused drug development is, because someone experiencing a disease will have very different expectations from someone who's just looking on as sort of a third party, be that a regulator, be that a sponsor developing a medicine, be that a doctor. They don't even have the same sort of understanding of those words as somebody really living the disease. It's important to know, I mentioned that it takes, a number of years. It's quite an expensive process, and we're going to go from a lot of different potential therapies down to sort of a single one. And this is really just meant to show it's a pretty risky process, and that when you start on the left and go all the way to the right, it's going to be fewer than 12% of candidates that are studied here in the early clinical trials that get to an approval from FDA. So companies are really trying to sort of de-risk, if you will, their investigation of new therapies, and having a better understanding of the patient experience, of what it means to live with a disease, of what kind of treatment expectations and aspirations a particular community has, can be one of those things that help them make better decisions all along the way as they, invest the time and the money to bring forward a new treatment opportunity. And if we think about where things have gone wrong in the past and why meetings like the one on April 11th are so important, we sort of look traditionally. And if you think about this setting of this whole long, timeline of developing a new treatment, there were really only 3 points in time when in the past patients had been involved. And the first one came in the early stages of research, with the community going out and raising funds and raising awareness in hopes of getting more university research going. And this is very typical for patient advocacy organizations to do fundraisers and call on community members to help fund research at a particular university with a particular expert who really understands the condition to move research forward. And that is still a need today, but it often is not enough to sort of jump from university-based research into research that is directed at developing new treatment options. And when that happens, and a company might get involved with clinical trials and studying a particular treatment in the patients with that disease, often in the past, they would sometimes reach out to patient groups if they were having a challenge, either recruiting patients into a study or keeping them in the clinical trial. And they would, invite patient organization leaders like Claire and Lindsay to come say, help us figure out what we did wrong in planning this clinical trial. Well, nobody likes to be, the repairman for a situation that you might have predicted on the front end. Could have gone better if you'd only asked, sooner than when things start to go south. So that is an opportunity sort of missed if you're going to wait until things go wrong to enlist the help from the patient community. And then the last point, traditionally, where patient perspectives were sort of brought into the frame of decision-making, was at this very last step when the FDA or the European Medicines Agency or another regulatory body is looking at all of the evidence that's been collected in these earlier phases of research and saying, do the benefits outweigh the risks? Can this be a safe and effective medicine for people living with this disease? And they might put one patient on a panel that sort of helps them assess that data and, include their voices among other experts at the table. But again, one person's perspective may not be adequate to understand what the range of experiences and perspectives are across the community. So, we can see sort of the missed opportunities with this being the old paradigm of how things were done for decades, if not centuries, going back. So in 2012, the FDA, working with a lot of patient advocacy organizations, took on a commitment to sort of change this paradigm and not to wait so late and have so few opportunities for patient perspectives to shape how new medicines were being developed. In 2012, so just a little more than a decade ago, the Patient-Focused Drug Development Initiative was established by the FDA. And in that commitment, they agreed to hold 20 meetings where they would bring in different patient communities to the FDA and hear from them on a few different things. What is it like to live with the disease that you have? How does it impact your daily life? What are the treatments that you're using? What are the lifestyle modifications that you're using? What are the most important symptoms that you're seeking relief from, and what would be, an important treatment difference for you? What are you really looking for when you undertake a medical treatment? And what they found was really impactful, and they actually, expanded their commitment from doing 20 meetings to 24 meetings. And they heard from, rare diseases, cancers, prevalent chronic conditions, including narcolepsy was one of the early meetings in 2013. And they got so much rich learning from that they actually expanded the program in around 2016 and created an opportunity for organizations like Sleep Consortium to work with them in close collaboration to host meetings on a number, a wider range of conditions, because they realized there was no way FDA on its own could really be the host for as many meetings as they knew they might benefit from. And sleep apnea was a condition early on in this new opportunity called the externally led PFDD meeting. And we had the opportunity to work with the sleep apnea community on that meeting, as well as the earlier meeting on narcolepsy. And to date, there have been, over 115 of these meetings. I've almost lost track. And many of them, I would say more than 60%, have been rare diseases. And that's been an area where the FDA has really benefited from hearing sort of from patients on the ground, if you will, about their needs and expectations, because often the literature for rare disease, IH included, is not complete. It is not, doesn't really reflect what the patient experience is. This is a very busy slide, but I wanted just to demonstrate that this whole effort that FDA has stood up over the last 12 years is just one of many patient-centered programs that is happening really around the world. And FDA works very closely with some of these organizations, and they're sharing best practices and thinking about new ways for patients to be involved in the development of new medicines. There's also, things happening on payment. In some countries, the US doesn't have this same system, but for instance, in the United Kingdom, where the payment for medicines is sort of determined at the government level, similar to Germany, they're involving patients in determining how to make decisions about the payment for medicines. And we're seeing that in some companies in the US as well, but it's not as centralized as it is in some other places. So our hope with this Illuminate Hypersomnia initiative is not just to put on a great meeting on April 11th, but that some of the learnings that we have throughout this whole initiative will be useful to individuals that are maybe appealing a drug denial from their insurance company, or for organizations in other parts of the world that are working with their regulatory authorities to kind of open up the pipeline for IH treatments as well. So some of the things that have come out of this PFDD series at the FDA is a real confidence in the patient perspective. They really got early on that patients have a unique expertise, they have a unique lived experience that make them complements to the other kinds of evidence that they're looking at when they're making decisions about the format of a clinical trial or whether a medicine is safe and effective. And they also recognize that, in the past, there were too few opportunities for patients to inform their thinking. And that it's sort of validated that these meetings are a way to obtain patients' perspectives about the severity of their condition, the impact on daily life, and the ability to assess different treatment options. One of the big learnings is circled here in this yellow box. They really early on found that there was often a mismatch between the things that the drug company was interested in treating in a particular disease and the things that mattered most to patients. And that was really a big aha moment for the FDA. And it's something that they are now sort of challenging sponsors who are developing new medicines to really factor into their planning. So we have a number of life science companies that are sponsoring and helping make this Illuminate Hypersomnia initiative possible. And I can tell you that they are really in active listening mode to hear from the community about that, because they don't want to make this mistake. They don't want to go after something that doesn't really matter to patients in their everyday lives. And I put this slide up for a reason. All of us have maybe been to different types of research meetings where the people with a long list of initials behind their name, PhD, MD, FACP, all kinds of different titles are the experts. But at this meeting on April 11th, all of you will be the experts, the people living with IH, the care partners, the caregivers, the parents, the spouses, the people who see this day in, day out, 24/7, have the lived experience and the expertise that the FDA is listening and looking for. So even though I started with sort of a wonky explanation of drug development, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is for each of you to bring your lived experience, your understanding of how this disease impacts your life and how it has changed your life, and what you're most looking for in treatments, both those that you may have access to and those that you wish were available to you. And we will take that information. This is a chart that the FDA developed to help translate what we hear at meetings like the Illuminate Hypersomnia meeting into things that drug developers will use. And again, this is sort of our homework on the back end when the meeting and the survey are finished, to help translate this into things that drug developers can make use of in their planning, and that the FDA will have in mind as it reviews different plans and proposals and applications. So now if we shift our thinking to the Illuminate Hypersomnia initiative, we want to, again, sort of help you feel empowered and powerful in sharing your story in a number of different ways that will contribute toward better understanding. And there are 3 parts of the Illuminate Hypersomnia initiative, and we'll kind of walk through them in order. So we've got a survey, the virtual meeting on April 11th, and then what will be coming out in the fall, the Voice of the Patient report. And starting with the survey, that was launched on February 6th, so it's been in the field for just a little over 2 months, and it will stay open for a month after the meeting. We know that some people may, find their way to the meeting and not realize that there is a survey, so we want to capture as many perspectives as we can. And just thinking about that survey, it is a very comprehensive survey, which I guess is a nice way to say it's kind of long. We won't lie. We wanted to be as inclusive and comprehensive in really capturing the experience of people living with idiopathic hypersomnia and those closest to them. So it's lengthy. We did try to break it up, and there is a save and continue feature. You can come back to it and finish it in several settings. You could take it on computer or on your mobile device, although we've heard from folks that it's much easier to do it on your computer. But if you're very savvy, more savvy than I would be, doing things on your phone, that might be more comfortable for you. We're really delighted with the response so far. We've already, as of this morning, heard from 405 members of the community, so really sort of exceeding our wildest dreams. When we set out to develop the survey, the biggest question was, how many responses do you think you'll get? And we were, I think, a little timid to put a number out there, but we had what we hoped for, and we had what we thought we might get, and we're past what we hoped for. So thank you to all of you who've taken the time and the energy away from other things to respond so far. And if you haven't had a chance yet, we encourage you to make sure your voice is part of the survey. We thought we'd offer just a few of the data points so far, and we are very careful not wanting to bias or send survey responses that might come in a direction by letting out too much data. So we'll just sort of let you know who we've heard from. 94% are adults with IH, and then sort of other categories here. We've had people from 17 different countries respond. And about half of the responses are from the US, and a huge response from the folks in Australia. Hypersomnolence Australia has been a great partner in helping push this information out. You can see that we've got folks living in all different settings, so suburban, urban, and rural, and ranging in age from 17 years, parents that are filling out on behalf of their teens, and someone as old as 83. With the median age, meaning half are older and half are younger, of 39 years old. A strong majority of participants identifying as female, and that's not unusual, both because IH does seem to have a higher proportion of women impacted, and also, hate to say it, guys, but women are more likely to take the time to do a survey like this. That's pretty standard. Predominantly white, but we do have some other representation here. And most people, a little more than half, are working or going to school full time. But we do have heard from a number of people who are full-time disability as well. One of the things that we were also concerned about was how we would, attract a group of folks who had been diagnosed and who, were pretty confident in that diagnosis. And it's been really remarkable to see 92% of those 405 have been diagnosed by a healthcare professional with IH. And perhaps even more interesting is the curve of when those diagnoses took place was sort of a hockey stick curve here going up, and a strong percentage, more than 20%, having been diagnosed just in the last year alone. And we have some ideas about why that might be the case. Of course, there might be a COVID related delay, and when sleep clinics were closed and it was harder to get into a doctor's office, but also, sort of hopeful that the awareness raising and the work that this community is doing to get the word out about IH is also contributing to this uptick in people getting diagnosed. We asked about the average age at which symptoms began to interfere with daily life, and that was age 27. So, and the range of years between the symptom onset and diagnosis, which was quite quick for some, but quite lengthy for others, 67 years of traveling through their journey without a set diagnosis. And so these are some of the factors that we've been thinking about in terms of bringing the meeting together on April 11th. And how do we reflect this range of perspectives? How do we make sure that we fully sort of tell the story, if you will, of all of the different factors that might affect someone's journey, both to diagnosis and how they make treatment-related decisions and how they're living their life with IH. So again, as a reminder, the meeting will be held on April 11th from noon to 4 Eastern US time. And we know that that's not convenient for everybody, especially West Coasters. Mornings are tough. The meeting will be recorded and it will be available on the website, kind of like you're watching a streaming show, where if you join at, say, 2 o'clock Eastern, you'd be able to start at the beginning and watch it kind of as if you were watching it live, or you can join at the 2 o'clock time and jump in with your questions and be part of the live audience. You'll have that decision and choice to make, which would work out better for you. And then you'll be able to come back a week later and watch it again, or watch parts you might have missed live. So it will be there as a resource for the community. The meeting format is very well defined by the FDA. As I said, there have been over 100 of these meetings, and they really follow a standard template to make sure that there is some consistency as they hear from diseases that might be, vastly different from one another. They want to make sure to structure this in a way that their reviewers and their internal teams can make use of the information in some of the ways that I showed on an earlier slide. The meeting begins with a brief presentation delivered by a clinical researcher that the host organization has chosen. And we're really thrilled that Dr. Trotty from Emory University will be giving that brief clinical overview. And that really is just to set the stage for the benefit of either agency reviewers or others watching who may not be as familiar with idiopathic hypersomnia, its natural history, and how it's typically managed by physicians to sort of set the stage. And then we'll also hear from an FDA staffer, Dr. Tiffany Farchione, who is actually over the review division where all of the applications related to idiopathic hypersomnia come into the agency. She will just give some brief remarks on behalf of FDA and why this meeting is so important to her and her team and her colleagues across the agency. There are then 2 different sessions, and they're structured in a similar way. The first one is on symptoms and daily impacts, and the second one is on current treatment options. And each of those have kind of a panel of patients and caregivers, and we'll show you what we mean by that. And then following that panel is a facilitated group discussion. And Lindsay Justat and I will be moderating that discussion and bringing in comments from a group of individuals who are on screen and those who are in the wider viewing audience. And we'll show you how we're going to be doing that. So if we look at the structure for the symptoms and daily impacts panel, as I said, it will begin with some pre-recorded testimony, and that will be sort of our panel discussion in this virtual world. Back in the before COVID times, when more of these meetings were held in person, you would have a typical panel with a long table at the front of the room and several microphones. But in our virtual setting, we do this by pre-recording people's statements, and those will be about 5 minutes each, to hear about their own journeys and different aspects of sort of the diagnostic process and how the different symptoms affect their lives. We have been in touch with a spouse of a woman with IH and sort of seeing how it impacts his life, parents of a teen, and different dimensions of the condition, so that we kind of get that full breadth of experience within the community. And then once those different vignettes, if you will, have completed, we will bring on a different set of 4 or 5 what we call discussion starters, and they'll be sort of live on the screen with Lindsay and me. And we will talk about different themes that we heard in the presentations from the different panelists. And we'll also weave in some other aspects of this whole topic of symptoms and daily impacts. Things like the stigma and the shame and the invisibility of IH, how it affects relationships and life aspirations, this topic of disability and greatest worries that people have when they live with this condition. And we'll be taking some of the survey results that we've received and blending those into the conversation. We'll have a phone number that people can call and dial into the conversation. Claire and my colleague Samantha will be screening those calls and making sure we bring people on in the right moment to have a nice flow of conversation. You'll be able to chat or send emails. So there's a variety of different ways depending on your comfort level, but we really do want to encourage everyone to engage as much as they can in this meeting conversation. It'll be really important that we reflect sort of the full breadth of experience. And then if we look at the second session that's dedicated to current approaches to treatment, it's the same format. So we'll have those same 4 to 5 presenters, each focused on a different topic, sort of related to the treatment of IH. And I want to also make the point that FDA is not only interested in sort of the medical treatment, the medications that you might be using. They're interested in over-the-counter things like vitamin supplements and, over-the-counter things you might buy in the drugstore, different diets, different sort of lifestyle adjustments that you might need to make in order to, help get the best quality of life possible. And we've got a lot that we've heard from that we're going to try to work into those recorded presentations. And then as we'll do with the first panel, we'll bring in another group of discussion starters live via Zoom, and we will again draw out some of the themes across the recorded presentations and have a conversation about some of the, classic and cognitive symptoms. Which ones are the ones that are hardest to treat with the available medicines? What are some of the downsides or the side effects that are just really tricky to endure? What are we looking for in terms of treatment aspirations? What would make the biggest difference in terms of a meaningful improvement in your life? How you might encounter using off-label medications that aren't prescribed specifically for IH, but might be used to treat different symptoms. And are there different barriers to getting those things? And then the last topic would be experience with clinical trials and what might make it possible as companies are developing new therapies. They always have to think about, is this a community that will take part in clinical trials if we host them in an effort to get a new treatment approved? And again, we'll have the same opportunities, survey results, telephone, chat, and email to bring in members of the community in this conversation. So if we think about the way of sort of hosting this meeting, you can also, think about it in terms of concentric circles where Lindsay and I will sort of be the moderators, keeping things running on time and facilitating the discussion during those open discussion periods. You've got the presenters and the discussion starters here in the yellow band that will be sort of prepared and ready to participate. And our hope for, this webinar and the other communications that we're sending out are that we've equipped the community participants to contribute by calling in or submitting comments. And again, we'll make great use of the survey results during the meeting as well. And then on this outer light blue band, we've got an audience and listening mode, and that includes the FDA staff, sponsors from companies that may be already developing new IH therapies or considering that. We often get some researchers and healthcare professionals that are interested in better understanding patient perspectives. And there's generally some interest from other rare disease organizations that might be thinking about doing one of these meetings and really wanting to see how it plays out. So a pretty wide group of folks that might take part in this meeting. But really at the heart of it, again, are the experts, all of you who have this day-to-day lived experience with either having IH yourself or being a care partner for an adult or a teen or child with IH. So I want you to really feel that expertise and live into it as we all come together on April 11th. So the last piece of the three parts of this Illuminate Hypersomnia initiative is the Voice of the Patient report. And what we will do is take everything we've heard at the live meeting, all of the survey results, once they are compiled on May 11th, a month after the meeting when the survey closes, and we'll develop a pretty extensive, comprehensive, hopefully thorough and authentic Voice of the Patient report. And we'll submit that to FDA, and that is certainly a key sort of audience for the meeting. But again, we want this to be an evergreen resource for the community as well, for all of you to have this as something you can use in your own self-advocacy, as something you can use maybe to educate family members or friends, and help really document the reality and the validity of IH. And again, it will be used, the Voice of the Patient and everything else will be used by drug developers and the FDA to answer some of the questions that are outlined on what's a fairly busy, wonky slide. And before we open up to questions, I just want to thank and acknowledge the partnering organizations. We've had tremendous partnership with these 11 organizations that have worked really hard to help us get the word out and help inform people about this opportunity. And we wouldn't be where we are without all of this help, as well as the 7 companies that are sponsoring this with unrestricted educational grants to make it possible. And with that, I will turn it back to Claire and see if we have some questions.
Thank you, Kim. That was so thorough and so helpful. I realize Lindsay and I are somewhat familiar with this process, but there's a lot there that you've been doing on the back end, which is your expertise, and it was so clearly communicated. Thank you. But we do want to take some questions in the next sort of few minutes before I just reiterate exactly how you can still get involved, because this is very much a live and ongoing process. Of course, the focus is April 11th, but I'll just pull up. So please do put your questions in the chat. And Kim, if it's okay with you, I'll just pull up a couple here.
Sure, please.
So one is because you so clearly laid out like the presenters and so on. So we have a question here. Have all the presenters already been chosen?
Many of them have. We've been working at this over the last several months and identifying folks both through the partner organizations, and we had a sign up that we have put out starting in November of people who could sign up for regular updates on the Illuminate Hypersomnia initiative. And we've been in touch with many of the ones who indicated an interest in getting more involved to sort of fill those different roles. But we are still, we've kept a few flexi roles that we know, we don't want to lose out on the chance for a perspective we haven't yet been able to reflect. So if that's something you're interested in, maybe there's, you can put the info@PFDD email into the chat and we can follow up with that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think Lindsay's doing that right now. So do get hold of us if you think you have a story that is relevant for this project. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so I think we have another one. I'm not sure how these necessarily kind of will square with you, Kim, but let's give it a shot. All right, so a follow-up. Could you share about the efforts to educate American sleep doctors about the inefficiency of the MSLT? Aside from a handful of researchers and clinicians, the sleep doctors seem completely unaware that the MSLT is not an effective tool, so they don't implement additional screening methods like the IHSS. And I think you're familiar with that shorthand, the multiple sleep latency tests. And the idiopathic hypersomnia, hypersomnia screening test as well. So Kim, have you got any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's a little beyond sort of the scope of this particular initiative, but I think one of the things I've seen come out of PFDD initiatives is a clearer understanding of where sort of the current, if you will, state of the disease is and where all the areas of unmet need are. And, that sort of spike in 2023 diagnoses and the length of time it's taken some people to get diagnosed, that 0 to 67 years of a diagnostic odyssey, really point to the fact that there is an under recognition, that the tools and the way that diagnosis of IH is made are inadequate, and that maybe there need to be a reexamination of guidelines of how doctors and especially sleep specialists are educated about IH. So while it won't be the focus of this meeting, and it's not really intended to be an outcome that we can measure at the end of the Illuminate Hypersomnia initiative, it is something that maybe we've collected some evidence that will help fuel those kinds of follow-up activities. And certainly having as many IH-related organizations involved with this means there's going to be plenty of work for everybody to do after the fact to really follow all the leads that this meeting helps identify.
Yeah, it's really helpful because I think we all focus on April the 11th, but actually the work continues. Just as a reminder, the survey is actually open until May 11th. So although, our focus in some ways is on April 11th, the actual work of this effort will continue beyond. And actually, as Kim said during her presentation, then, there's the voice of the patient report as well, which we hope and anticipate will be a significant contribution to the literature and of course accessible to patients because it's essentially written and informed by everyone here. So thank you. All right, so I have another question. So the question is, are practitioners attending or invited to this meeting?
It is open to all comers. We hope that the word has gotten out far and wide and that people have set it aside, maybe if they can't watch live because of their clinical schedule or, their obligations during the workday, that they will have the opportunity to, view the recording. That will be up and available on sort of an on-demand basis, if you will. And we hope that it will have utility in a wide variety of settings, just as the other, the voice of the patient will.
Right. Thank you, Kim. So I have another question here. I think it's just dropped off, but basically it was someone saying, if they have a diagnosis of narcolepsy type 2 that was originally IH, should they still fill out the survey?
We know the diagnoses, particularly between IH and narcolepsy type 2, can be sort of fluid, depending, we already had a question about sort of the lacking nature of the MSLT and how that might come out on any given day. So yes, there is the opportunity for people who've had sort of that mixed diagnosis to take the study and indicate that, and we can look at the data in many different ways. It is going to be a rich and robust data set that gives us a lot to think about and learn from for many, many months, if not years.
Right. So maybe for the purposes of this webinar, Lindsay, could you just put the survey actually in the link, the survey link in the chat, I should say. Okay, thank you. I'm just seeing some pieces. And of course, if you've got any questions following this webinar, please do go to the Sleep Consortium website and follow us on social media. I think we've got time for just maybe 1 or 2 more questions, Kim. So here's one. Will you be addressing the number of people who are told they do not have IH because sleep doctors, I think we've just answered that. Actually, it's the sort of same kind of questions because the test for IH does not evaluate hallmark symptoms like sleep inertia and long sleep duration.
And those, we have a lot of symptom-related questions in the survey. And there is also, people can indicate that we phrased it as self-diagnosed. And some people have written in like, my test didn't show it, but my doctor thinks I have it, even though the results weren't quite right. So again, we can take all of that information and then we can slice and dice it in different ways to look at what the differences might be. And we will have symptom-related responses from all of those individuals. So we hope it will be a very useful survey, sort of, even if you're in that bucket of people who don't have the physician or the testing approved diagnoses, and we'll be able to look at it differently.
Thank you. That's so thorough and helpful. Realize that we are getting close to time, want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you so much for joining. And you can follow us on social media, all the usual platforms, and our website. Obviously, you will see the Illuminate Hypersomnia page, which is designated specifically to this effort. We do welcome you to join us on April the 11th. And of course, the survey is still open. As Kim says, we're sort of nudging at just over 400 participants. We'd love to get that even higher, and we still have some time. So thank you for your patience with that. It is a commitment, and we really are so grateful for your effort and respect your effort for leaning into this project, which I think we all are here because we believe it's really important and it's going to make significant impact to individuals and the community at large. So with that, any final comments from my hosts and panelists?
No, just, these are some ways you can help get involved, help spread the word, use your own social media and other channels within the community to really sort of expand the participation as far and wide. Invite your own doctors to take a look at it, complete the survey as Claire encouraged. And there is, I think, an RSVP on the website now. If you want to just sort of reserve your place early, that would be great. You don't have to sign in, don't not come if you forget to RSVP. Show up on the day of and there will be a seat for you, but we'd love to get a sense of how many folks have set this aside on their calendars as early as possible. But we are really looking forward to it. We hope we do this topic justice. It's been really fulfilling to get to know so many members of the community over the past several months and to have their experiences and stories sort of in our heads as we're working toward, the meeting itself.
Thank you. All right, so I'll just close by thanking everyone again for this collective effort towards raising awareness and hopefully access to new medications and improving the lives of everyone that is affected by idiopathic hypersomnia directly and as caregivers and loved ones and the community at large. So thank you again to our team here doing this webinar, and we are really excited to see you in a couple of weeks. And do fill out the survey if you can in the meantime. Get hold of us if you've got any questions. Again, thank you. Have a super day.